When it comes to interactions with the law, I've always been on the bad side of things. I've always been the one getting questioned, possibly getting handcuffed, possibly getting arrested during my troubled teenage years. And I've never been a cop. I've never done any detective work. I've never been the good guy in a situation, always the bad guy. So LA Noire was a game that sort of interested me because you play the role of a cop. And, I'd always like to do stuff like detective work and, research things and whatnot. It always seemed super interesting to me. So I picked up LA Noire back in the day on my PS3. And for whatever reason, I played it for like an hour and I enjoyed it, but I never really got into it. And then I just sort of forgot about it. There's a ton of last gen games that I never got around to really playing. I would just buy them, play them for a little bit, and then put them on the shelf and play something else. Now, my housemate at the time, on the other hand, he loved the game. He would play it all the time. And sometimes I would go watch him play on his Xbox 360, and it just seemed like a fascinating game. But then I never got around to playing it. Well, when LA Noire was announced for the Nintendo Switch, I got interested because I like the portability of the Nintendo Switch, and this seemed like a game that could potentially work on the platform. So now LA Noire is out for the Nintendo Switch, and I've been playing it a bunch, and I've decided I want to make a video on this because I got a lot of things to say about it. So LA Noire for the Nintendo Switch, is it worth it? Should you pick this up on the Nintendo Switch? Let's find out. So LA Noire was developed by Rockstar Games, who of course we all know for Grand Theft Auto and the Red Dead Redemption game. And those games were very interesting because Grand Theft Auto usually takes place in a more modern time. Red Dead Redemption takes place in a time where there's no technology, but LA Noire takes place in the late 1940s. And honestly, that is a huge part of the game, is just the world of the 1940s. The way the game looks, the way the game sounds, the way the people talk, the way the people dress. It feels like you're really going back into that period of time with the atmosphere and the storytelling and whatnot, and it really sort of sucks you into the game. It makes you think of a world where technology wasn't prevalent, but things were starting to rise, and the industrialization and the consumerism of the world that was coming about during that time period. Now, in LA Noire, you play as a cop named Cole Phelps, and Cole was a military guy, and you get sort of military flashbacks throughout the game that sort of start to lead you into the arcing story, because although all the police cases are their individual cases, there also is an arcing story that goes along with it. And one thing I have to say right off the bat is that I don't really like the throwback scenes to when he was in the army, because for some reason the sound is really weird on him. It's really loud, and like noticeably loud. Like you have to lower your TV a little bit. They're so loud compared to the rest of the game. So I don't know if this was a bit of a snafu, but that's probably one of my biggest complaints with the game, is that these scenes are just so loud and it's like so overbearing, and I don't know how they didn't notice that, but it is worth mentioning. Now, what's interesting about LA Noire is the gameplay, because there are so many different gameplay styles mixed into one game. You would expect at least one area to falter. There's driving, there's shooting, there's questioning and whatnot, but the game seems to blend these together just seamlessly. So the way that LA Noire pretty much works is that you start out at the headquarters and you get a case, and then you start to go out on that case. Now, like any good cop, you have your little notebook and you're sort of taking notes about what you're doing. So you have people like witnesses, people that you need to interrogate, crime scenes you need to investigate. So you usually drive to a crime scene, investigate the crime scene, get some clues from the crime scene, and then sort of build on that and start to question different people. Now, the questioning in this game is actually very, very cool. They've actually modified it a tad bit from the original release of the game. Now, when you're questioning someone in a one-on-one situation, there's a good cop, a bad cop, and a accuse section that you can accuse people of something. If you have proof, you could be a good cop and try to be nice to them, or you could be a bad cop and pretty much just be a dick to them and try to force answers out of them. And the way the game works is all of the questions have proper answers, and if you get the question wrong, it doesn't necessarily stop your progress in the game. It just alters the way the game is going to be played from then on out in that scenario. So for instance, there could be some scenarios where you can arrest a bunch of different people, but you might only end up arresting one of them because you didn't answer the questions right. You didn't ask the right questions and whatnot. So it really adds, I say all that to say this, it really adds to the replay value of the game, because there's so many different outcomes. There's so many different scenarios that could potentially happen. In other things, there could be a situation where you have to shoot someone, or maybe you just have to pull your gun on them and make them stop running, but you decide to shoot them. So then once again, it alters the whole course of the game. Now, the shooting mechanics in the game are pretty decent in my opinion. There's a simple cover system with the R button, and you just pop up and start to shoot people. Shooting isn't really one of the, core emphases of the game, I don't feel, but it is there. It does pop up from time to time, and it's pretty well done in my opinion. You're also spending a lot of time driving around to different locations, and that's how you start to see the city and really get into this 1940s feel with the radio going. You could put on your little police siren, you can jack other people's cars, listen to the radio, and while you're driving around to different locations, sometimes there will be crimes happening that you can respond to. And I like these crimes that happen randomly because they're sort of more action-based. There's always something going on. Whether you're trying to calm down a suspect, whether you're trying to capture someone, chase them down, or whether you're just in the middle of a shootout, there's always action going on in these things. And it sort of breaks up the slower pace of this game because unlike a game like Grand Theft Auto, unlike a game like Red Dead Redemption, which is in a massive open world, LA Noire is not really like that. It does have the open world aesthetic to it. You can pretty much drive wherever you want, but it's sort of pointless because there's not a whole lot of things going on within the world. It's a definitely more story-driven game than these other games, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. But I think people that are expecting this to be, an open world GTA style game may be a little bit disappointed in the fact that there's not a whole lot going on within the world itself. Me personally, I really got into the story because the voice acting is arguably some of the best ever. There are, actors in the game, there's actresses in the game that lended their voices to it, and their facial animations, like Vincent D'Onofrio. You'll hear a bunch of different actors that you recognize from, movies and television, and you'll even see their facial recognition. And the facial animations in this game are amazing. They were amazing back on the PS3, honestly. It's just one of these games that uses this special technology to capture their faces and whatnot. And it's super crazy to look at because it's almost creepily like real life, like the way people are just animated in their faces when they're talking or when they're thinking about something, and you can read people's faces to try to figure out if they're lying or whatnot. And that involves your good cop, bad cop, and accused situations. It's really interesting the amount of work that they put into the facial animations in this game and the voice acting in this game. It is top-notch presentation through and through. Some of the best facial animations, some of the best just voice acting, period. And it really helps suck you into the story because there's a lot of conflict going on. There's a lot of drama. Each individual case has its own thing going on. And some of these cases get pretty mature context. There's some real, crazy subject matter in these cases, whether it's murder, whether it's, rape. Like there's some questionable stuff in here, but that's the kind of stuff that cops have to deal with. That's the kind of stuff that unfortunately happens in the real world. So it also happens in this game. Now, LA Noire is also being released on the PS4 and the Xbox One. And there's been a lot of talk about graphics of the game because it's not technically a remaster. They just sort of repolished it, I guess, and added in all of the DLC into a modern package for modern gamers. And honestly, LA Noire on the Switch looks pretty good. I really like the way everything looks. There is some drawing, there is some pop-up, but that's actually prevalent on the other versions of the game as well. There are better textures in this version of the game as opposed to the PS3 and the Xbox 360 game. So this is more akin to the PS4, Xbox One, which honestly isn't that much of a visual upgrade. So if you're expecting something, heavily graphically processed and something, mind-blowing, you might be a little bit disappointed because it definitely has sort of that last-gen aesthetic. Just looks a bit more crisp and a bit more polished. Now, what I'm going to start doing in my reviews is focusing on handheld stuff as well, because a lot of these Switch games are starting to embrace the handheld side of things. And honestly, LA Noire is a game that really embraces the handheld side of things, almost to the point of where I feel like they developed this version of the game sort of with the handheld stuff in mind, because there's gyro controls in this game. There's touchscreen controls in this game. They really take advantage of the Switch's unique features, and you could sort of manipulate objects with it. You could use the touch screen and do all sorts of things. It's actually pretty streamlined, and it's actually really well implemented into this game. I wouldn't say necessarily that it adds anything to the game, because some people just don't like motion controls and whatnot, or touch screen controls, but it's nice to be laying in bed and be like, oh, I can manipulate this object with this instead of using the analog stick, because you're constantly having to look at different objects and whatnot in order to build up your case. LA Noire is a really interesting game, and there's a lot of content in the game as well, and there's a lot of replay value because of the way that the cases can have different outcomes. You could easily spend anywhere from 30 to 40 hours on all of the mainline stuff, and then once you factor in the DLC, once you factor in all of the different outcomes that could be put into the game, you could easily spend 100 hours in this game. I'm well on my way in this game, and I feel like there's so much more to do and there's so much more to see. So is LA Noire worth it on the Nintendo Switch? For the most part, yes. I think they really did a great job with this port. You know, it's definitely nothing that's, you know, gonna be like compared to next gen stuff, because the PS4 version and the Xbox One version looks pretty damn similar to the Nintendo Switch version. But the Switch version adds in that portability aspect, and the fact that saves are often pop up because they're automated saves, it really lets you enjoy the game in sort of bite-sized samples. You could play for 5 to 10 minutes, the game will save, and then you could go about your day and then play a little bit more and play a little bit more. And some of these cases get really long, and so that's a nice feature to have with the Nintendo Switch version. If you're expecting a game like Grand Theft Auto on the go, unfortunately, this is not going to be the game. It's definitely more story-driven. There's definitely more story to be, you know, sought after in this game, and the open world aspect, although it's there, isn't very, you know, populated. There's not a whole lot of stuff going on. You're not going to have random stuff popping up all the time. But if you're looking for a really good story, a lot of content, and really interesting gameplay that mixes shooting mechanics, driving mechanics, chasing down mechanics, questioning mechanics, and you've ever wanted to be a cop, LA Noire to me is a no-brainer. It is a fine package on the Nintendo Switch that unfortunately might get overlooked with games like Doom and Skyrim coming out. But I think LA Noire deserves some props. It's a really good port. I'm really enjoying the game, and I think it's one of the better third-party games on the Nintendo Switch so far. So let me know in the comment section down below what you think of LA Noire. If you've played it on the PS3 and the Xbox 360, if you played a remastered version, or you plan on picking up the Switch version. And thank you for checking out this video. As always, if you're new here, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, leave me your stuff in the comment section down below, and I will catch you guys next time. Later.